this American pragmatism and foresight and so on really was very strong, and it had to be, otherwise America would not have been successful. So that's a second part, that's another part that I talk a little bit about, and I think I've really covered everything that this vague invitation you gave me to come down and chat with 2 or 3 people and sort of let's see where the thing led. It's, I've just sort of wandered in every direction now, and I hope that you've got something out of it. If some of you would like to see a little bit, I see a slide of Mr. Inouye, just talk a little bit about him. Something I should say something about is Dr. Deming. For a long time, I pressed Mr. Inouye. You know, my article, the deadline for my article was the summer of 1982, and I kept writing to him, this would be a chance for you to pay a tribute to Dr. Deming, and I never got any answer. And I kept sending him, and one day he sent me a letter. He said, "Mr. Hopper, I am in receipt of your letter of the something something, the something something, the something something, the something something, something something, something something. I'm trying to reply to these." And the one thing he wasn't replying to was what I said about Dr. Deming. And to me it was perfectly obvious that someone like himself who had been in the forefront, it'd be a wonderful opportunity. I'm sure he'd be very glad. He'd been tremendously praiseworthy of the Americans, Protzman and Polkinghorne and everyone else, he'd want to say. And nothing happened. And then the phone rang one day, and the president of Sumitomo Electric in New York phoned me, and I made notes of this conversation. And I'm sure we have to make certain allowances here for translation and so on, but he was just very deprecating about the whole Deming story. Here, he pointed out to me that he said he didn't attend the Deming lectures, and that he had sent a young engineer to it, and the young engineer had said that Dr. Deming didn't say very much other than describe fairly standard statistical quality control. He said that he didn't attend it himself because he had attended Sarrasin's lectures in quality control. Here is a letter that Sarracen has, which I haven't got into publication yet, from Brigadier General George Beck, who was the chief of the Civil Communications Section. And this is a nice long letter. Sarracen, I think, was immensely influential in Japan. He couldn't teach them much about management because he was a young fellow. He had actually fought through the Pacific War, and he had only just got back and joined Raytheon when he got this phone call saying would he come out and give a hand, and he went. But here is what the general said to him: "I wish to commend you for your outstanding work in introducing in Japan the modern concepts and practices of statistical quality control, and for your development of the series of courses in modern and industrial management methods through which you have so ably indoctrinated Japanese management personnel in up-to-date techniques of production management, manufacturing methods, production engineering, and design engineering practices." And the explanation that Nagasaki, the president, went on to give me was that when Dr. Deming gave his lecture on statistical quality control in the summer of 1950, he had been in Japan earlier, but then he wasn't working with industry at all. He was advising the SCAP on taking a census of the Japanese population. In 1950, he was invited out to come and teach statistical quality control, and Sarracen says that he thinks he was the person who initiated that. Anyway, Deming came out, and incidentally, I'm a great admirer of Dr. Deming. He was greatly helpful to me. He sent me many documents, and I discussed this with a great deal of hesitation. I haven't written anything about it. When he arrived, the JUSE, the Japan Union of Scientists and Engineers, was planning to award a prize for the company that did the best in improving its quality. And Dr. Deming very kindly offered them the royalties from his book on statistics, which was being translated into Japanese. And the JUSE very gratefully called the prize the Deming Prize. And the decision to call the prize the Deming Prize was made in November of 1950. And if this was supposed to be a reflection on how Japanese management had improved so much in those days, it really wasn't very much of an honor, because Japanese management at the end of 1950 wasn't very much different from what it was in the middle of 1950, which was pretty terrible. So this again is not denying Dr. Deming's work and what he did give to them, but subsequently the prize became very important. If we sort of say, why is the Nobel Prize for Peace called after Mr. Nobel? Is it because of his contribution of dynamite to the world that I'm afraid it wasn't. Presumably he contributed the money to it. So this is a kind of a myth which I understand Dr. Deming hasn't claimed himself. I talked to Dr. Deming and I said, were there people in Japan before you teaching? And he said, yes, there were, but I don't know who they were. And this has become almost like a kind of industry built up by, forgive me saying so, certain QC practitioners who are saying, we have the one true light here and let's go ahead with it. And with things like this lying around, and Mr. Inoue statement to me, I think we should be a little bit cautious in attributing too much to Dr. Deming, because one of these days it could collapse, and that would be worse for Dr. Deming. I mean, nobody's saying that he didn't do... to me, Dr. Deming, I'm pleased many people have seen him, because I have seen the character of people like Polkinghorne and Protzmann. And again, coming back to this old Puritan thing, you'll find in my article I make a reference. I said to Polkinghorne, he wrote an introduction to the seminars in which he referred to the importance of honesty and honest dealing, and also incidentally he talked about the value of democracy to an industrial organization, not democracy within the company, but the advantage of having a democratic sized society outside. He argued with them that if people were afraid to speak up outside the company, they would be afraid to speak up inside the company as well. And if you want to know what's going to be wrong, you must operate in a democratic society. And I have never seen that put into a management course ever, anywhere. And I've had the pleasure of attending management courses since the late 40s. Here we have Polkinghorne, this kind of knobbly character, a very gentlemanly fellow, but when something was wrong or had to be done, he'd be knobbly. I feel it'd be the same with Protzmann, a very quiet fellow. Protzmann is a 6'3" character, thin, you know, the kind of Americans you saw in your movies in the mid-century. Saracen's not tall, but again, this same sort of character that I felt that Dr. Deming going round presenting himself, he's again the same sort of character. He feels these things have to be said, and he may rather be an elderly man and rather sort of sit down and take it easy, but he feels they have to be said. So I'm rather pleased that people are seeing Dr. Deming for that reason. Again, Deming, according to Protzmann, I said to Protzmann, aren't you a little bit upset at all the credit being given to Deming? He said, well, you have to understand what happened. We were part of the occupation forces. We were the people who were oppressing the Japanese. You can't expect them. I mean, he's still getting letters from Mr. Matsushita, Mr. Kobayashi, saying how wonderfully, how much they appreciated his help. You can't really expect the Japanese government to come around and say, we're glad you were here. So Deming arrived as a non-military, not attached to GHQ at all, and at that time the Japanese were so grateful to the Americans for what they have done that in a way they were giving this honor to Deming as, you know, as a symbol to the others as well. So I've said a little bit about Dr. Deming there, and anybody who wants to discuss it with me, I'd be glad to do so. I feel that things have gone just a little bit too far. I mean, they're starting up a new college in New York now, and it's going to be called the Deming College of Management or something like that. Perhaps we should... Anyway, if we are going to give them that award, we should know why we are doing it. Not because, as so many people say, because the phrase they use is he was the architect of modern Japanese management. I mean, I don't think even Dr. Deming's claimed that, but a lot of people sort of sticking their flag on him are claiming that for him. Well,
you might like to take a few minutes to wind up with the slides.
Oh, yeah, as I said, I would let you see Mr. Inoue.
Okay,
Let me do that.
That one seems to be stuck.
And it so happens I put him on first. I don't know, to me he's got a terribly nice face, and he was just a terribly nice character, and